My fiancé spent 8 months convincing me that every bad feeling I had was proof that I was insecure, and for a while I believed him. When his phone was suddenly face down, I was insecure. When he came home smiling at texts he wouldn't explain, I was insecure. When he got weirdly defensive whenever I mentioned his ex, I was insecure. When I said his friends looked at me like they were all in on some joke I didn't understand, I was insecure. That was his favorite word for me, insecure, because it was softer than paranoid and kinder than crazy. But it did the exact same job. It made me doubt my instincts, apologize for my discomfort, and feel grateful every time he decided to reassure me instead of admitting what he was actually doing. What he never imagined was that one night, while I was sitting on the floor of our half-furnished apartment surrounded by wedding invitations and seating charts, I would unlock the one thing he had kept closest to him, and in less than 10 minutes, I would understand that he had not just been lying to me. He had been humiliating me for an audience. Before I tell you how I found it and what I did next, tell me where you're watching from tonight. When I met Ryan, he was exactly the kind of man women get warned about in vague language and still fall for anyway. He was funny without trying too hard, attractive without seeming arrogant, confident without looking desperate for attention. He listened closely, remembered details, and knew how to make a woman feel chosen. That last part matters because some men are not really romantic. They are just excellent at creating exclusivity. Ryan made me feel like I was the one woman in the room who truly understood him. He told me his last relationship had been emotionally exhausting, that his ex was controlling, jealous, and impossible to reassure. He said being with me felt easy, peaceful, mature. I should have paid more attention to the way he described her, not because I cared about his ex, but because men who call every previous woman crazy are usually pre-writing your role in the same story. At first, everything about us moved fast in the way that seems flattering when you're inside it and suspicious when you look back later. He wanted to see me all the time. He introduced me to his friends early. He said he had never felt this sure about anyone. He learned my coffee order, remembered my deadlines at work, sent sweet little messages in the middle of the day, and had a way of looking at me in public that made other women seem to disappear. If I'm being honest, part of what made me fall so hard was how safe he made certainty feel. He didn't seem like a risk. He seemed like relief. After a few failed relationships and one especially humiliating situationship with a man who could never define anything, Ryan felt solid. He used words like future and home and someday with no hesitation at all. So when he proposed after a year and a half together, I said yes without fear. I thought I knew him. I thought I was being chosen by a man who was emotionally transparent, deeply committed, and proud to love me in public. That public part turned out to be true in the most dangerous way possible. He loved being seen with me. He loved posting pictures, making toasts, telling people how lucky he was. He loved the image of us, and because I mistook that image for intimacy, I ignored the little fractures that started showing up after the engagement. Nothing dramatic happened at first. It was smaller than that, which is exactly why it worked. He became more protective of his phone. He started laughing at messages and saying it was just the guys. He got weird whenever I mentioned one specific ex, Melissa, even though he had spent months before our engagement telling me she was irrelevant. If I asked a normal question, he answered it like I was cross-examining him. If I noticed that his best friend Evan smirked every time wedding planning came up, Ryan would tell me I was imagining tension. If I said one of his friends seemed to dislike me, he would smile and kiss my forehead and say, "Baby, not everything is about you." That sentence does more damage than people think. Not everything is about you. It sounds like perspective. It sounds mature. But in the hands of the right man, it becomes a weapon. It trains you to distrust your own reactions because now any discomfort you feel becomes selfishness. And Ryan was very good at that kind of emotional choreography. He never shut me down in a way that would look obviously cruel. He simply translated my instincts into character flaws. Suspicion became insecurity. Hurt became oversensitivity. Questions became trust issues. By the time the wedding was 3 months away, I was apologizing for things I had not done, second-guessing my tone in conversations he had made uncomfortable, and feeling weirdly grateful every time he decided not to be offended by concerns he had created. The first moment I should have treated as a full stop came during a dinner with his friends about 4 months before the wedding. There were 6 of us at a rooftop bar, and the mood was light. People were joking, drinking, telling stories about old college disasters and dating mistakes. At one point, one of Ryan's friends, Caleb, said something like, "Well, at least this time you found someone who doesn't check your phone every 5 minutes," and the whole table laughed too fast. Not naturally. Not like it was just a random joke, like they were all reacting to a private reference. Ryan laughed too, then squeezed my knee and said, "Ignore them, they're idiots." I smiled, but the feeling stayed with me. Later in the car, I asked what Caleb meant. Ryan rolled his eyes and said his friends loved exaggerating old stories about Melissa. I asked why it felt like I was part of the joke, and he got annoyed immediately. He told me I was doing that thing again where I assumed people were talking about me. When I went quiet, he softened his voice and said, "This is what I mean, babe. You spiral so fast." I ended up apologizing before we got home. That became our rhythm. He would create confusion, I would react, he would frame my reaction as the problem, and then I would feel guilty for bringing up anything at all. If I said I didn't like the way Melissa still liked his posts and sometimes responded to stories, he said I was inventing a rivalry. If I asked why he deleted some messages but not others, he said adults value privacy. If I said his energy changed around certain conversations, he told me I was reading into nonsense because I expected trouble everywhere. And the worst part is that he wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't obvious. He was calm. That calm is what makes men like him so dangerous. If someone mistreats you loudly, at least part of you knows you are being mistreated. But when someone slowly teaches you that your discomfort is a flaw, you start participating in your own confusion. I remember one night in particular, maybe 6 weeks before everything blew up, when I woke up around 2 in the morning and noticed the bathroom light under the door. Ryan had taken his phone in there, which was strange because he usually left it charging beside the bed. He came out a few minutes later and almost dropped it when he saw I was awake. I asked who he was texting at that hour. He laughed and said one of the guys had sent something stupid. I asked why he needed the bathroom for that. He looked at me in a way that instantly made me feel foolish and said, "Do you hear yourself right now?" Then he lay down, turned away, and added, "I'm not doing this every time my phone vibrates." I spent the next day ashamed, even though all I had done was ask a question that made perfect sense. The real psychological damage in relationships like that isn't just the lie. It's the repetition. It's the way you get trained to abandon yourself in increments. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me because I knew exactly how the conversation would end. He would sigh, go quiet, ask me why I always assumed the worst, and eventually make me feel like I had wounded him by doubting his character. Then he would turn tender again and tell me he understood that I had been hurt in the past, which was his favorite little twist of the knife. He made my trust in him sound generous and my suspicions sound pathological. So I tried harder. I became more careful, more measured, more reasonable. I told myself that maybe wedding stress was making me overly reactive. I told myself that maybe all couples go through strange little periods where things feel off. I told myself that maybe a good partner knows when to stop picking at uncertainty and just choose peace. Then came the weekend that should have been one of the happiest parts of the engagement. My sister and 2 friends flew in to help me finalize wedding details. We spent a Saturday trying on accessories, narrowing down flowers, and arguing over table arrangements in the silly, affectionate way women do when they're excited for each other. Ryan came by in the evening with takeout, kissed me in front of everyone, and made a perfect little joke about how I was somehow making spreadsheets look beautiful. Everyone loved him. My sister said when he left that I was lucky to have found a man who seemed so patient and secure. I smiled and agreed, but that night when I crawled into bed next to him, I felt this heavy little stone of dread sitting in my chest for no reason I could explain. He noticed I was quiet and asked what was wrong. I almost said I didn't know. Instead, I told him I was just tired. He kissed my forehead and said, "Good." I was worried we were about to have another insecurity conversation. He smiled when he said it, playful, light, as if the possibility of my pain had become one of our shared little jokes. There is a particular kind of humiliation that only becomes visible in hindsight. At the time, it feels like discomfort. Later, you realize it was disrespect dressed as intimacy. That line stayed with me. Another insecurity conversation. It bothered me not because it was harsh, but because it told me something about how he saw me when I was not easy. Not as a partner who deserved honesty. As a problem to be managed. A mood to contain. A flaw that interrupted his otherwise smooth life. 3 weeks before I found the group chat, Melissa reached out to me on Instagram. Not directly, not dramatically. She liked one of my engagement photos from months earlier, then unliked it almost immediately. Most people would ignore something like that. I couldn't. I clicked her profile and saw nothing unusual, just polished photos, travel shots, gym selfies, a very curated version of someone who still cared what the internet thought. I stared at her face, trying to understand why her presence always changed the room even when she was not physically in it. When Ryan came home that night, I asked him casually if he had heard from her recently. His whole body shifted before his face did. It was tiny, but I saw it. Then he frowned and said, "Why are we doing this?" Not no. Not what makes you ask. Just a defensive move straight into annoyance. I told him I was just asking because her name had come up in my head. He laughed in disbelief and said, "You need to let that woman go." That answer was so strangely phrased that I felt cold. Let that woman go. As if I were the one holding on to something. A week later, Ryan left his Apple Watch on the kitchen island while he was in the shower. I was making coffee and not trying to snoop when a message preview lit up the screen. It was from Evan and it said, "Delete the old pics before she ever sees that thread." My heart stopped so suddenly it felt physical. I picked up the watch and the screen dimmed before anything else came through. When Ryan came out of the shower, I asked who Evan was talking about. He looked at the watch, then at me, and laughed. He said they were making fun of another friend who never deletes anything and almost got caught with old photos from a trip. I remember saying, "Why did your face change when I asked?" And Ryan actually smiled like I had just proven his point. He said, "Babe, because I'm exhausted. Every random message turns into a crime scene with you." Then he kissed me and said he had to leave for work. I stood there holding my coffee so tightly my fingers hurt. I wish I could say I left right then. I didn't. Because once someone has been training you for months to distrust your instincts, you don't recover your self-trust in one moment. You keep looking for a version of reality that does not require your whole life to explode. That's the part people on the outside never fully understand. They ask why you stayed after the red flags. The answer is that when manipulation is gradual, leaving doesn't feel like one obvious decision. It feels like stepping into chaos, based on something everyone keeps telling you is your imagination. The night I found the group chat, I was not searching for proof. That is what still fascinates me. I had not planned some dramatic confrontation. I had not gone through his phone while he slept. I wasn't even angry when the evening started. I was tired. We had spent the whole night working on wedding logistics in our apartment. Half the place still smelled like cardboard and fresh paint because we had moved in recently. Invitations were spread across the coffee table. His suit-fitting appointment was booked. My dress alterations were almost done. We were so close to the version of life I had been telling myself was real that the whole room felt like a set designed to support his lies. Around 11, Ryan said he was going downstairs to grab something from his car. He left his phone on the couch beside me because it was charging and he assumed he'd be back in 2 minutes. His laptop was open on the table. Music was playing softly. Nothing about the moment felt like a turning point. Then his phone lit up with a message preview from a group chat named Survivors Club. The preview said, "She actually cried at that. I'm dead." There are moments in life when your body understands something before your mind does. I felt sick instantly, not suspicious, not curious, sick, because suddenly everything strange had a center. I picked up the phone before I could talk myself out of it. He had changed his passcode recently, but I knew it anyway because I had seen him use it 100 times. I unlocked it, opened the group, and in less than 5 seconds my whole face went hot. Ryan, Evan, Caleb, 2 other friends, and Melissa. They had been talking about me for months. Not abstractly, not occasionally, not one cruel joke in a weak moment, repeatedly, deliberately, enthusiastically. They had screenshots of my texts, photos I had sent Ryan in private, clips from videos I didn't know he had saved, jokes about my expressions, my voice, the way I worded things when I was upset. Melissa called me the rehabilitation girlfriend. One of the friends asked how long he thought he could keep the sweet act going. Evan said he had honestly expected me to crack sooner. There were references to moments I remembered vividly, But from their side, they were punchlines. The rooftop dinner, the bathroom texts, the questions about Melissa, my discomfort at certain parties. Every moment that had left me feeling slightly off had later become content for a group performance. The worst part was not even the insults. It was the enjoyment. They were not just cruel. They were entertained. My trust was entertainment. My confusion was entertainment. My attempts to communicate carefully and honestly with the man I was about to marry had been turned into evidence that I was unstable, clingy, emotional, easy to manipulate. Ryan had sent screenshots of me asking calm, measured questions with captions like, "And here we go," or "Tonight's episode just dropped." Melissa responded to one of my longer texts with, "She writes like a hostage negotiator." Another time, when I had apologized for being anxious and thanked him for reassuring me, Ryan posted the screenshot and wrote, "Reset complete." That one almost made me black out. Then I found the thread that mattered most. It was older, from before the engagement, but still active enough that people kept reacting to it. They were joking about how Ryan should propose because I was fully invested and too image-conscious to walk away once the venue is booked. Melissa wrote, "He should absolutely lock it in before she grows a spine." Ryan replied with a laughing emoji and said, "Relax. She wants to be the chill fiancé so bad she'll talk herself out of anything." Then there was a photo of the ring. Not the final, polished proposal photo from our trip. A photo of the ring in a jeweler's box weeks earlier, sent to the group like a prop in an ongoing joke. I was still reading when the apartment door opened. I don't know how I managed it, but I put the phone down exactly where it had been and sat back on the floor with a stack of place cards in my hands. Ryan walked in smiling and holding a bottle of wine he had apparently gone to grab from the car because he thought we deserved a celebratory glass after finalizing the guest list. He looked at me and immediately knew something had changed. Maybe my face was too still. Maybe men like him always know when the audience has become aware of the script. He asked, "You okay?" And this is the part I will always be proud of. I smiled. I said, "Yeah, just tired." He studied me for a second, then relaxed. He kissed the top of my head, poured wine, and sat on the couch beside the phone I had just used to watch him betray me in real time. I remember thinking that what I felt in that moment was not heartbreak. Not yet. It was clarity. Heartbreak came later. That night, what came first was clarity so sharp it felt almost peaceful. Because suddenly every confusing conversation, every cold shift in his tone, every "you're overthinking," every "not everything is about you," every "don't start," every "you spiral so fast" clicked into place. He had not been overwhelmed by my insecurity. He had been manufacturing it. I did not confront him that night. I know some people would have. They would have thrown the phone, screamed, called him names, ended it on the spot. Maybe that works for some people. It would not have worked for me because the second I confronted him, the story would have changed from what he did to how I reacted. He was too practiced, too calm, too good at reframing. No, I needed him comfortable. I needed him arrogant. I needed him thinking he was still ahead of me. So I drank half a glass of wine, let him talk about tuxedos and travel plans, went to bed beside him, and stayed awake most of the night staring into the dark, while the man I had almost married slept like a child. By morning, I knew 3 things. First, I was not marrying him. Second, ending it privately would not be enough. And third, whatever I did had to be clean, not chaotic, clean. Because humiliation had been the center of what he took from me, not just betrayal. Humiliation. He had turned my trust into a performance for other people. He had let his friends and his ex sit in judgment over my private pain while calling me insecure for noticing something was wrong. The ending needed to restore something in me, and that meant he was not going to walk away with his image intact. For the next 10 days, I became the best actress of my life. I did not go cold. I did not become distant. I became easier, softer, relieved even. I stopped bringing up anything remotely serious. I laughed more. I apologized less because I no longer needed his reassurance, but I made sure that looked like emotional growth instead of detachment. Ryan loved it. He thought he had won whatever twisted little game he had been playing. He kissed me more affectionately, started talking excitedly about the honeymoon, and even joked once that maybe wedding stress had finally stopped getting in my head. I smiled at that too. While he relaxed, I worked. I took screenshots of everything I had seen in the chat the next time he left his phone unattended. Not all of it, just enough. The most damning parts. The photos, the mocking captions, the proposal jokes, the messages from Melissa, the reset complete line, the way his friends talked about me like I was an object under observation. Then I forwarded those screenshots to a new email account I created solely for this purpose and deleted every trace from the phone. I also took photos of the group member list, timestamps, and enough context that no one could claim the screenshots were isolated or taken out of context. After that, I started quietly untangling the wedding logistics. I called vendors under the pretense of making scheduling adjustments and learned which payments were refundable, which were not, and what deadlines mattered. I spoke to my maid of honor, but only after I had enough proof that she would not ask me to, at least hear him out. I told her everything, and then watched her face go white in silence. She asked, "What are you going to do?" I said, "He's very worried about me embarrassing him in public. I think that instinct deserves to be respected." That was the first time, since finding the chat, that I almost smiled for real. I did not tell many people. That was intentional. I knew if I told too many friends or family members too early, the story would leak sideways, get diluted by opinions, and maybe even reach him before I was ready. I told my sister, my maid of honor, and one cousin who is the most efficient woman on earth and can execute a plan without adding useless emotion to it. Together, we handled logistics, quietly, methodically. The wedding was still scheduled for 3 weeks away, and by then most guests had already RSVP'd to the engagement dinner our families were hosting the weekend before. It was one of those polished pre-wedding gatherings people throw to merge families and make speeches and post photos, and let everyone admire how beautiful and stable everything looks before the big day. Perfect. The best revenge is rarely the loudest. It is the most accurate. I did not want him screaming at me in private and later telling people I had become unstable under stress. I wanted him forced to stand in front of the exact audience he had been performing for and lose control of the story in real time. The engagement dinner was held at his parents' country club, which somehow made the whole thing even more disgusting. White tablecloths, candles, soft lighting, polished silver, one of those rooms that makes people instinctively lower their voices because they think elegance can protect them from truth. My dress was pale blue. His suit was charcoal. My makeup was perfect. If someone had frozen the scene before it began, it would have looked like the beginning of a beautiful life. Ryan was glowing that night, and I think part of that glow came from his confidence that he had managed me successfully. I was calm. I was smiling. I had not questioned him in days. Whatever fear he may have felt the night I found the chat was long gone. People gave speeches. My father said he was proud. His mother cried. One of Ryan's friends made a harmless toast about surviving wedding planning, and everyone laughed. I looked around the room and thought about how many people there had no idea what kind of man they were applauding. That made me sad for maybe 5 seconds. Then it made me angry enough to become very steady. When it was finally my turn to speak, Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. He had no idea. I stood up with my glass, smiled at both families, and began exactly the way a happy fiancé would. I thanked everyone for coming. I said how much love and support Ryan and I had felt during the engagement. I said planning a wedding teaches you a lot about partnership, communication, trust, and the private character of the person you're building a life with. People nodded. A few smiled. Ryan looked moved. Then I said that over the last few months, Ryan had taught me one word especially well: insecure. The room did not change immediately. Not yet. They still thought maybe I was making some cute self-deprecating joke. I said Ryan had taught me that when a woman notices something off, asks a direct question, or feels unsettled by obvious red flags, sometimes she gets told she is not perceptive. She gets told she is insecure. I said I had heard that word so often from him that I nearly started believing all my instincts were flaws. Ryan's smile started thinning around the edges. His best friend, Evan, looked down at his drink. Then I reached into my bag. I held up my phone. And I said, but it turns out I wasn't insecure. I was surrounded by liars. No one moved. I said that a few nights earlier, purely by accident, I found a group chat Ryan had been using for months with several of his friends and his ex. I said that in that chat, my private messages, my photos, my emotions, my questions, and my trust had all been turned into entertainment. I said the man I was supposed to marry had not just lied to me behind my back. He had humiliated me for an audience and then called me insecure for sensing it. At that point, Ryan stood up and said my name sharply, the way people do when they still think authority can reverse reality. I kept going, calmly. I read 3 messages aloud, not 20, not enough to sound hysterical, just enough, one from Melissa, one from Evan. And then the one from Ryan that said, she wants to be the chill fiancé so bad she'll talk herself out of anything. That one changed the room. You could feel it. It landed in people's bodies. My mother covered her mouth. His father looked at him like he was a stranger. One of his cousins muttered, "What the hell?" And I knew then that he was finished. Ryan tried to talk over me. He said it was being taken out of context. He said it was dark humor. He said private jokes between friends were not the same as betrayal. That almost made me laugh. Private jokes. As if my pain had accidentally wandered into their comedy routine. I looked directly at him and said, "No, a private joke is when everyone involved is laughing. This was humiliation, and you needed an audience because lying to me alone was not enough." Then I said the line I had been holding for 10 days. "I'm not insecure. You just got too comfortable being cruel." The silence after that was almost beautiful. Ryan stopped trying to interrupt me after that. Maybe because he realized everyone in the room had already shifted away from him. Maybe because he understood, too late, that calm truth is much harder to fight than chaos. I told both families that there would be no wedding. I apologized to anyone inconvenienced by the cancellation, then added that I would rather embarrass him one night than spend a lifetime being humiliated in private. I thanked the people who had genuinely loved me, put the microphone down, took off my engagement ring, set it on the table in front of him, and walked out. I could hear movement behind me, chairs, voices, my sister catching up, someone calling my name. Ryan did come after me, but not immediately. That mattered to me more than it should have. Even in that moment, his instinct was not to comfort me. It was to assess the room, manage the optics, calculate the damage. When he finally reached the hallway outside, he looked furious and panicked at the same time. He said I had blindsided him. He said I could have talked to him privately. He said I had made him look like a monster. I remember turning around and saying, "You made yourself look like one. I just stopped helping you hide it." He tried one last trick then. He lowered his voice, softened his expression, and said, "You don't understand the context." That was it. That was the only defense he had left, context. As if there were some hidden emotional logic that made a group of adults mocking my trust normal. I looked at him and said, "Context is what you spent months using to make me doubt what was right in front of me. I don't need any more of it." Then I left him there. The fallout was immediate and ugly in the way truth usually is when it enters a room that has been arranged for appearances. Some people reached out with real concern. Some with curiosity disguised as concern. Some with the cheap hunger people have for drama that doesn't belong to them. I ignored most of it. Ryan called for 2 days straight. He sent long messages, short messages, angry messages, devastated messages, apologetic messages, manipulative messages. At one point, he said he had made stupid jokes because his friends were immature and he wanted to seem like he was not whipped. That explanation did not help him the way he thought it would. If anything, it made him look smaller. You betrayed the woman you were about to marry because you were afraid your friends would think you loved her too much. How pathetic is that? Later, he tried a different angle and claimed Melissa had been provoking him, that he had been trying to keep things light, that it had gotten out of hand. But screenshots are ruthless. They don't care about post-disaster narratives. He had not been passively present in the cruelty. He had driven it, repeatedly. Melissa sent me one message 2 days later that simply said, "I never thought he'd actually marry you." I stared at it for a long time before blocking her. There is something so revealing about that kind of woman. She thought the deepest cut was telling me I had never been the real choice. But by then, I had already learned the truth. Being chosen by a man like Ryan was never the prize. The practical side of ending an almost wedding is less glamorous than people imagine. There were contracts, phone calls, refunds, lost deposits, uncomfortable conversations with extended family, and a dress hanging in a garment bag that I could not look at for weeks. It was not fun. It was not cinematic. It was administrative grief. But even in the middle of that, there was one thing I never felt for a second after that dinner: doubt. Not 1 second. Pain, yes. Humiliation, yes. Rage, absolutely. But not doubt. That might have been the greatest gift the group chat gave me. Once I saw how he spoke about me when he thought I would never know, every last shred of confusion disappeared. I was no longer negotiating with a feeling. I was responding to evidence. People always ask afterward whether I was more hurt by the ex being involved or by the friends. The truth is that neither of them mattered as much as Ryan did. Melissa was cruel because she enjoyed being relevant. His friends were cruel because group cruelty is easy and cowardly men love audiences. But Ryan was the one who took the woman he claimed to love, opened her private fears in front of other people, and called that harmless. He was the one who saw my sincerity and used it as material. He was the one who watched me apologize for instincts he knew were accurate. That is a specific kind of betrayal. It's not just cheating. It's not just lying. It's identity-level disrespect. It tells you that the relationship you thought you were protecting never existed in the form you believed it did. For a while after it ended, I kept hearing his favorite lines in my head. You spiral so fast. Why do you always assume the worst? Not everything is about you. You need to let that go. I replayed those conversations and saw them differently each time. What looked like patience had been management. What looked like reassurance had been redirection. What looked like calm maturity had been contempt with better posture. Once you see that, you start noticing how often women are asked to treat self-betrayal as emotional intelligence. Stay calm. Don't overreact. Be understanding. Be secure. Be the bigger person. But secure women are not women with no instincts. They are women who trust themselves when the room tells them not to. About a month later, one of Ryan's friends, not one from the main chat, just someone adjacent enough to know things, reached out and apologized for not speaking up sooner. He said the group had been mocking me long before I found it, and that at first everyone thought Ryan was just venting in a stupid way, but over time it got darker. He said Ryan seemed to enjoy the power of making me doubt myself more than anything else. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it surprised me, but because hearing it from the outside made something final lock into place. It wasn't about Melissa. It wasn't about his boys wanting a laugh. It wasn't even about him being secretly uncertain about marriage. It was about power. My confusion was power. My apologizing was power. My willingness to keep loving him while he slowly eroded my self-trust was power. And the moment I stopped being confused, he lost all of it at once. The strangest part of recovery was how quiet it was. I expected fireworks in my own body. I expected dramatic catharsis. Instead, what I got was silence. A cleaner kind of silence than I had ever known. No constant mental rerouting. No scanning his tone. No second-guessing whether I was reading too much into something. No rehearsing questions in my head so I could ask them in the least threatening way possible. Peace, it turned out, did not feel like being with Ryan at his best. It felt like being away from him completely. I learned things about myself after that which I wish I had known sooner. I learned that my instincts had been healthy all along. I learned that anxiety can be a rational response to manipulation. I learned that women are often taught to be embarrassed by the exact sensitivity that could save them. I learned that asking direct questions is not insecurity. Noticing inconsistency is not insecurity. Feeling unsettled by disrespect is not insecurity. The real danger is when someone benefits from you believing that all of those things are flaws. Ryan kept trying to reach me for months. At first it was apologies, then explanations, then nostalgia, then bitterness. He said I had ruined his reputation over jokes. He said I had weaponized private communication. He said adults should have handled things like adults. That part was especially funny to me. Adults. As if men in their 30s mocking a woman's private texts in a group chat with an ex were somehow operating at a higher level than the woman who exposed them. Eventually, his messages stopped. I heard through mutual connections that Melissa disappeared again once the public humiliation turned onto her too. Some of his friends backed away. Others stayed close, probably because people who share a certain level of moral rot tend to defend each other until it costs too much socially. And that was the real payoff in the end. Not just that I left. Not just that I exposed him. It was that he did not get to keep the image. Men like Ryan survive on image. Charming, composed, patient, misunderstood. They rely on the contrast between how they act in public and how they behave in private. They count on the woman beside them being too heartbroken, too ashamed, too dignified, or too exhausted to tell the truth clearly. The night I stood up in that room and read his own words back to him, I took away the only thing he had really been protecting. The best part is that I did not need to destroy him with exaggeration. I only needed accuracy. I only needed his own behavior, his own words, and the timing he never saw coming. That is why the ending still satisfies me. Not because I enjoy humiliation for its own sake, but because he spent months making me feel ridiculous for sensing what was happening. He made me apologize for seeing the truth through the fog he created. So yes, there was something deeply healing about watching that fog vanish in front of everyone at once. If you're listening to this and wondering whether you are just insecure, let me say something I wish someone had said to me sooner. The right person will not need you confused in order to feel safe. The right person will not use calm language to make you distrust your own discomfort. The right person will not train you to apologize for noticing patterns. And the right person definitely will not build intimacy in public while turning your vulnerability into entertainment in private. If your instincts keep knocking, answer them, even if your hands shake, even if the truth is ugly, especially then. I did not marry him. I did not forgive him. And most importantly, I did not let him keep the story he had been writing about me. I was never insecure. I was surrounded by people who needed me to question myself so they could keep doing what they were doing without consequences. Once I understood that, the ending became simple. Painful, expensive, messy, yes, but simple. So if you want more stories like this, subscribe now. There's a lot more coming. And before you go, I've got another video here with a story you do not want to miss. It's another betrayal story that starts one way and ends somewhere even darker than you expect. Click into that next one because trust me, it will surprise you.